Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Darting Around podcast. My name is Jesse Dart, joined as always by Jaden Griffin, and congratulations, you've made it to episode 4. We have a big show to talk about, Jaden. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, so we're actually going through, in my opinion, what's a very underappreciated position, which is the ruckman role. We're going to talk about initially some premiership teams, how important the ruckman was to them, and then sort of go through, since the turn of the century, probably our best ruckman that we've ever seen play.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I want to talk about before we really crack into the premiership ruckman is why you think the rucks are so important. So, obviously, first obvious answer is tap, getting the ball to your player. We see so many ruckmen that just can't find their midfielders. They just turn the ball over time and time again. So, if you were to build a perfect ruckman, what do they do?
So I think, obviously, the tap is very, very important. They need very good chemistry with their midfielders. They obviously need to be able to find them. I think if you can tap it directly to your player, you don't need as strong of a midfield as possibly you would if your ruckman can't hit a tap. And then I also just like their big man going forward, kicking a goal, taking contested marks. Very, very important. And just fitness, moving around the ground, being able to run out full quarters, super, super important. And I think they can be very high impact players.
Absolutely. So we've come up with a little, as I said before, we're talking about Premiership Ruckman first. Then we've got almost a Hall of Fame, I think, of our best. We've got about 10, 11 Ruckman written down here from the last 20 years that we think are the best in their trade for their era. But we'll look at the Premiership Ruckman first. All the way back to 2000, so Essendon's dominant year. I thought we were covering a bit of old ground, a bit of a callback to episode 2 with the Premiership Ruckman from episode 3, rather, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was episode 3, I think.
With the Premiership dominance of the 2000s. So we'll start with Johnny Barnes from the Essendon Premiership team. Very good ruckman for a long time in the 90s. Was starting to slow down here, but I think deserves a bit of credit for his ability to fight off the age to get the Bombers the flag.
Yeah, I agree. That Essendon team wasn't necessarily the strongest in the midfield. They were obviously very, very good, but I think Barnes played a huge part in their ball movement and just the way they were able to just feed the ball consistently down to Lloyd and Lucas. I think, Barnes deserves a lot of credit for that. Yeah,
now we've allocated 6 stars to 20 Premiership ruckmen. Some of those are double-ups as well in the stars. Barnes is one of our star picks, purely because, I think, as we said, he was very good for a long time. He might not have been in his peak when Essendon won this flag. I think his peak was probably when Geelong went down to Carlton in 95.
Yeah.
That was probably his best era. Actually, fun fact for the little collectors out there, when they did the set of 50 little AFL bobbleheads in 97, Johnny Barnes was one of them. I did have that one many years ago.
Well deserved, I think.
I think so too. It was a very good player for a long time. Very odd that the scaling wasn't in place, so John Barnes was the same height as James Hird. That's fine. So
excellent.
We don't mind that. I will be tracking a few of those down as well. So we'll have to get those as little decorations for when we do change up a few things on the podcast, which we'll talk about in a few weeks.
Yeah, very exciting.
Absolutely. So let us know which 90s Pro Stars bobbleheads you want to see in the background of our set. There should be, hopefully, a few mentions of Ben Allen.
Of course.
He will be in there automatically, and I will be very cross if anyone says anything disparaging about him. We'll move on to the Brisbane dominance now. I think we said this last week. The one position they didn't have complete monopoly over was ruck.
Yeah.
Because there is one man in this list that has come up 3 times as the number 1 ruckman. There's a couple that have been back up, but there's one man that's come up as the number 1 ruckman 3 times, and that's Clark Keating.
Yeah, I think a lot. Like I said, if you have a really good ruckman, you don't necessarily need a very good midfield. But I think it also goes the other way, because Brisbane's midfield was so good and so dominant. They didn't really need a ruckman to find taps, to still find a lot of the ball. And I think Clark Keating's a good example of that. He's serviceable, but he definitely wasn't a key. You could swap him out for a lot of ruckmen on other teams at the time, and Brisbane would have been just as good of a team. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about Keating.
We're not going to sit here and hurl abuse at him by any means. He is a handy player, but at the same time, you have to consider the fact but he also wasn't that good.
Yeah, well, how many taps are you realistically going to lose if your midfield... Well, sorry, not taps, but how many standard clearances are you realistically going to lose when you've got Simon Black, Michael Voss, Ackermanis, Nigel Lappin, Powell, just all going through there, you know what I mean? Those are just some excellent names.
I want to point out, this is actually my favourite segment so far, purely because someone at 5'5" is now hurling abuse at players that are 200 centimetres tall. And
yeah,
that is just very
must
funny.
Feel good, mate. Must
it
feel
is.
Good.
They give me a 35 centimetre height differential. But yeah, here I am sitting down, comfortably telling everyone that Clark Keating was crap. So look, we'll move on to 2004 now, and this is one we're going to come back to, I think, later on in a bit more detail. But Dean Brogan gets the nod here as the Premiership ruckman. However, he was back up to Matty Primus, who sadly went down earlier in the season. But I think Brogan filled some pretty large shoes to a pretty good extent, given how young he was as well.
Exactly, and that's what I wanted to talk about as well, is he was so young when he came in. I think he developed into quite a good player. But yeah, what he did when he was so young, being pretty pivotal to that Port side, was quite impressive. Obviously, Primus did a lot of the legwork. He was very good for that Port, very, very strong Port era of 01 to 04. And yeah, for Brogan to do what he did, I thought, good player.
Yeah, absolutely. 2005, another era we covered in pretty good detail, I think, last time. Darren Jolly gets the nod here for Premiership ruckman for Sydney. Good ruckman, good team. I think he was probably, as I said before, I think his peak was at Collingwood.
Yeah.
I think he was a better player at Collingwood than he was at Sydney. But there's also a reason that Collingwood forked out for him and arguably, got a steal out of that, getting Jolly across.
Yeah, of course. He was very important to that Collingwood side, as, we'll probably go through, or not. Yeah, we will.
They did win a flag after all.
Yeah, but I think Jolly probably was better at Collingwood purely because of that better midfield that they had. I still think he was very, very good at Sydney. He definitely stood out in the league at the time as one of the top tier ruckmen. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Ruckman that I think probably the best on this list, Dean Cox.
No questions asked.
Yeah.
He is 100% the best player that we will talk about in this opening segment at least. Arguably even probably the whole podcast.
Yeah.
Just really changed the way that ruckman played, and even with such a good midfield that he had around him, never really let up. An amazing tap ruckman, excellent work around the ground, just did what he needed to do, could run out 4 quarters, just overall a very, very phenomenal player.
And I want to give a 2-second mention as well to Mark Seaby. As far as backup ruckman go, they did really well there.
Yeah.
As a backup ruckman, Seaby was top tier. I mean, we saw him obviously move on from West Coast. I think he went to Sydney, and it didn't really work out. But he was pretty serviceable as a backup ruckman. If you can have him as your second choice ruckman, your first must be really good.
Yeah, and I think that's just what Dean Cox was, right? He was just very, very good.
2007 was Geelong's progression into dominance. Brad Alton's was the starting ruckman for this game. Stephen King also involved. 2 very good ruckmen. I think this is probably the best 1-2 combo that we're going to talk about. I don't think that anyone else that we've got here, especially the next one, comes close. But yeah, I mean, Alton's very good for a very long time. I've always considered Alton's more of a utility player. I know we said the utility is just a fancy word for rubbish, but I think he was. He was a player that could play multiple positions. He was very capable. King, probably more traditional tap ruckman. I think you almost you could go without here, especially given they won by 119. You could almost go without one here, but you're not going to complain about having both in that side.
No, you're definitely not. Like you said, Otten's very, very versatile. Did a lot for that club. Had very, very good support around him, which I think enabled him to kind of just do what he felt like doing, which was he was a high impact player. I thought he was quite important to that Geelong side, which is why they've gotten the star as probably a duo.
Yeah, I think that's a star duo almost. I can't see any list looking further down. I can't see any combo that's better than those two for me anyway. 2008, Hawthorn's almost surprise ascension to the flag here. It was almost Geelong's one to lose, and they did.
They did. They managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory in what was a very, very surprising grand final. Obviously, Hawthorn developed into an incredible team and it really built that dynasty. But yeah, I think they definitely did steal this one off the back of 2 not so good players, I would say. Robert Campbell, Brent Renouf, not anything special by any means. They're not terrible. But I think a lot of that Hawthorn power came from that midfield, and like we have spoke about with Clark Keating as well. Once you can take a step back in that role once you just have a midfield that is going to be so dominant.
Look, I can only see one in my opinion, worst ruck duel in this list, which we'll come to later on, they weren't great.
No, they weren't. They were not super important, like I spoke about as well with Keating. You could probably swap them for a lot of the other duos in the competition and you'd still have gotten the same result. A lot of the power in those Hawthorn teams was definitely not in the ruck role.
Yeah, absolutely. But 2009, Alden's still at Geelong, playing second fiddle ruckman here to Mark Blake. I think he was fine. I'm not going to complain about him winning a flag.
Yeah, no, he was. Yeah, you're right. That's probably the best word we can use for him is fine. That Geelong side, just going back through to actually, we had to double check who was the other ruckman to Otten's in that 09, and just looking at that squad, it's understandable why they didn't necessarily need superstars in the ruck to have that kind of dominance. It was just such a good team.
And we're going to issue a very late addition to episode 3. Wojcinski has to get mentioned for that Geelong team as well.
Completely underrated. Wojcinski was such a good player. Just a hard nut as well. Just really did what he needed to do week in and week out.
Absolutely. So 2010, Collingwood get their flag. Darren Jolly appears now for the second time in this list. You couldn't complain about Michael Gardner winning one on the other side as well for St Kilda, I think. But Jolly, being the better ruckman, probably deserves to be a 2-time premiership ruckman given his body of work over a very long time.
Yeah, just kind of got it done week after week after week, didn't he? He was very, very good. Loved watching him play. Yeah, spoke most about him in the 05 segment, but no, I do like Jolly.
We're going to cover old ground again here. Brad Alton's getting his third premiership at Geelong. Very, very impressive. So we said before that that Clark Keating was the only 3-time primary premiership ruckman. Alton's played in 3, but he was secondary to Blake in 2009. But let's be honest, he was the main ruckman. Probably, arguably king in 2007. But at least twice, he was the best ruckman in that list.
Oh yeah, definitely, and to do it for so long as well, very, very, very impressive.
Just a player that I think you almost don't see any of an Alton's type in the modern game now, do you?
No, I don't think you do. He's, like we said, that versatility, which I obviously talking about on previous episodes as well. I really rate that versatility. I think it's hard to keep a player down who can do so many things, and so yeah, that's probably why I do rate Alton so highly.
Shane Mumford, 2012, a name that I think more associated now across the bridge at Greater Western Sydney.
Yeah.
I think that's probably how his legacy will be remembered as a GWS player.
Powerhouse.
But look, decent enough ruckman. I think he deserves credit, especially for his longevity. He's been around for a pretty decent amount of time now.
Yeah, he has. He's done it for a long time, and someone whose body is so big too. It can't be easy on your joints, your muscles, your bones to do it for so long. Just crunches them week in and week out. But I do like Mumford. He's serviceable.
The richest man in Western Sydney is his physio. So 2013 was the start of the Hawks' premiership dominance. Max Bailey, number 1 ruckman in 2013, backed up by David Hale. Is this another situation of the midfield makes the ruckman rather than the ruckman makes the midfield? Yeah,
100%. There's no doubt in my mind that neither of these players have really impressed me at all. Like they're not terrible. Like I said, I
thought Hale was alright up north.
Yeah, he was okay, but I don't know. I think you're right. The midfield made all the difference to making their job so much easier.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair statement. 2014, Bailey goes out, Hale moves to primary, and Ben McAvoy backs him up as the second tap ruckman. Again, they were versing a pretty iffy Sydney side.
Yeah.
So this wasn't necessarily one they were going to really struggle with, I don't think. So it doesn't really matter who you put in the ruck.
No.
As long as they can win a hit out.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I don't even know if they really, with how good that midfield was for Hawthorn, I don't even know if they even really need to win a hit out.
That's fair. That's reasonable. 2015, McAvoy and Hale just swap.
Yeah. Yeah, McAvoy, I think, he developed quite fast. He's a good player. Still a pretty good player. Not too much to say, as I said. Like, it's nice to see him really overtake Hale so quickly.
Yeah. And
just find his role in what was a very, very good side, and probably didn't even need to change anything to continue their dominance. But it was good to see from McAvoy. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I think he's a player that I think will probably doesn't get enough recognition for how well he's played for Hawks for such a long time. Because obviously you see the players that come up so consistently when we talk about that dynasty. You make sure Lewis, Gunston, all these players that come up. I don't think McAvoy gets in the conversation enough when he really was a very important dual position player for them.
He was. He definitely was. And I think maybe some of that is because he kind of hit his stride as Hawthorn were on the decline.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's not that he was bad during their dominance. It was just he was kind of easy to overlook because of how many other important players were in that role. And when he did become super key to Hawthorn's strategies and tactics, they were already on the decline. They were really struggling to keep up with a lot of the other lists in the AFL. So it's just unfortunate for him.
You could almost argue the same for Bontempelli at Western Bulldogs.
Yeah,
He's kind of hit his stride since that zenith from them in 2016, which we're coming to now. Actually, that's pretty well timed. Jordan Roughhead, Premiership Ruckman 2016. Look, I mean, he was versing Naismith in the ruck, so this was...
Yeah, not exactly a battle of Goliaths there. Neither all too impressive. Roughhead again, serviceable, good team around him, and just a lot of heart and passion from that doggy squad, as we've said before. They just refused to lose that grand final.
They wanted it more than the Swans, and that was the difference in the end of the day.
Yeah, it was.
2017, Toby Nankervis did it on his own as Richmond really got a hold of Adelaide. Also, surprisingly, I thought he really did nullify Big Sammy Jacobs, who...
he towed him up.
Who, on paper...
is a much, much, much more impressive player. You're right. But, yeah, I don't know if it's something to go with Adelaide mental collapse or what really happened. But, yeah, Nankervis really ran a train on him in that grand final. It was pretty sad to see. And without dominating the ruck, I don't think that Adelaide midfield had a chance against that Richmond side. And,
no.
Yeah, you saw it. I mean, you saw it on the day, didn't you?
That was probably the one position on paper that they were going to win Adelaide.
Yeah.
And it just didn't happen.
No, it didn't, and it hurt them.
It really did. 2018, no Nick Nat, no worries for West Coast. They did it with Scotty Lysette, who I think's now doing a pretty good job at Port when he's fit and firing.
Yeah, I think he's probably helped by the fact that he doesn't have to... With Dixon and Westhoff, especially Dixon, he doesn't really have to take a massive load as a ruckman at that club, which really helps him. I don't think he's super, super dominant.
No,
but
he's not dominant.
But he does have his moments. He can definitely take over a quarter. He has a beautiful tap when he actually gets it, and he can also go forward and kick a goal. Definitely a serviceable player.
Laddams too.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. Yeah, Port have a lot of ruckmen, actually. A lot of people that can take taps.
They've always had a pretty good ruck stock, Port, haven't they?
Yeah.
They've always had a pretty consistent ruck stock.
They've always been quite a tall squad, actually. As far as I can remember, just a lot of tall players in that squad. Love to play the corridor as well because of it.
Yeah. Also, Nathan Vardy backing up there. Look, handy player.
Yeah.
Can't as a backup ruckman, you can't fault him.
No, you definitely can't. I think he probably was... at least for me, I think he was a bit of a meme in 2018, but he has come a long way, and probably did give him too much flack in retrospect. But yeah, no, he's fine as a backup ruckman.
We'll kick it home with 2019 now with possibly the worst duo on this list.
I think so.
I think it's worse than 2008 because, as I said to you before off camera, I don't trust Nankervis to tap apples out of my tree, never mind a football. They're just not very good, are they?
No, they're not. They're not good. Both of them are kind of... It's kind of ham-fisted into that squad too because they play similar roles. So it's just
it's almost like you can't trust either one, so you have to bring them both in.
Yeah,
because one's going to stuff up.
At least the duo of Ottens and Blake or Ottens and Stephen King, they're different players. They can do different things. They don't have to just both be in the ruck. Nankervis and Soldo both kind of just get no taps and then go forward and miss goals.
Yeah, they're very much cookie cutters of each other.
Yeah.
I feel like. Look, I'm going to be honest, if Nankervis or Soldo... Well, Nankervis gets his third flag this year, or Soldo gets his second, I almost give up on the AFL.
Yeah, I agree. I am very, very sad at, I guess, a lot of the dominant teams at the moment just don't really have much going for them in the ruck, which doesn't help my argument of ruckman being underappreciated, but I also just think they're not utilised as well as they should be.
That's fair. Can't wait to cover the Lithuanian Premier League next season on Darting Around's podcast.
Yeah.
Look, we will move on now. So that's the recap of the premierships. But to be honest, not many, especially compared to the list we're going to talk about, only, I think, 3 come up here. Cox, Ottens, Jolly.
Yeah. And even then, since the turn of the 2010s, no one... Jolly and Ottens are in there in 2010 and 2011, but since then, no real standout ruckman in the last 8 years.
Yeah, our last star goes in 2011.
Yeah.
It's interesting, I think, as well. And we'll talk about it when we get to the 2010s, but look, we'll start with the 2000s ruckmans. I've written down 6 names here that I want to talk about today. Dean Cox, the first one. We have to talk about him first, I think.
Of course.
I think probably the best ruckman here.
Yep.
Purely because not only was he a good ruckman, but I think if you start him if he hits his peak in 2000 or he hits his peak in 2020, it doesn't matter. He's still going to be close to the best ruckman in the competition. Because he can play the tap and he can get around the ground, and there's not many ruckmen that can do both. To the level that he can.
Yeah, no, there's not. He's a very, very special player. He did a lot for that West Coast side. Probably made, not so much Judd, but made Cousins and Kerr look probably a little bit better than they actually were, just because of how easy it was.
That's a big call.
Well, look, not that they weren't amazing. I mean, Cousins, again, one of the best disposals I've ever seen, but at times could struggle to find the footy, different to Judd, who I think found a lot of his own ball. Just having Dean Cox, I think, is incredible for any midfield and would make anyone look good. So obviously, having him with 3 already good players really elevated them all to superstar status. And like you said, runs out 4 quarters, takes a contested mark, can go kick a goal. A really good disposal, actually, for a big man. Doesn't have a lot of that awkwardness that you see from a lot of ruckmen, and just kind of changed the way people perceived how the role could be played, which, yeah, can't be understated how important that was.
I think for me, when I look back on Dean Cox's career, I see a really smart footballer coupled with a really talented footballer. I think right now, he's obviously assistant to Longmire at Sydney right now in the coaching sphere. I can see him having his own gig. I really can.
Yep, I would agree. He lives and breathes footy. He definitely has seen a lot of midfields and how they operate. He's someone who can appreciate how important a ruckman can be, and probably also being at this Sydney side, also now understands maybe how having a not good ruckman is going to affect you.
Yes.
But yeah, no, he's very, very, very smart player.
They're going to need to make the coach's box a bit tall, though, aren't they?
They are, yeah. They'll need to extend it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we see Clarko punching walls. He's going to be headbutting the roof every time the 50-metre penalty goes against him. But look, from one that we think probably should be a coach to one that was a coach for a very fleeting amount of time. And look, off the top of my head, he's the only guy on this list that's actually captained his side. Did Luke Darcy captain? No, Brad Johnson was always captain.
Brad Johnson, I think so, yeah.
So, well, he just gave away one there.
We'll talk about him next.
I think that was a given, though.
Yeah.
But look, Matty Primus, very unlucky not to be a premiership ruckman. Went down very cruelly with injury in 2004. But he was a very, very good ruckman during a very, very good Port Adelaide team.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about a few, especially with Brisbane in this time, where the midfield made the ruckman. I think the ruckman and the midfield were just as good as each other. Yeah. And they had that same level, which made them even stronger.
Yeah, it did. Primus was an incredible player. I loved watching him play. I probably didn't get to see as much of him as I would have liked, because it was quite early and I wasn't as into football then as I am now. But yeah, I don't really have much bad to say about Primus. He was just a really good player.
Disappointing didn't work out for him in the coach's box, but similar to what we said about Manny Nix in episode 2, can't really do much with that, can you?
No, you can't. He just had nothing really to work with. Didn't really get the faith. Probably didn't get the backing from the players that he needed, and it just kind of the floor just kind of fell out from under him.
I genuinely wonder if he considered actually making a playing comeback every time he watched Brent Renner run onto the ground for his team.
Yeah,
I genuinely think if he thought, either I choose death, or I can do a better job than this man, he is not very good.
Yeah, I wouldn't have blamed him. I think he would have done a much better job.
I actually would love to get a brain scan of what was going on inside his head every time he watched Renner go up for a ruck contest, because Primus is one of the best ruckmen of his era, and then he looks at that.
Yeah.
And he sees that.
Yeah,
He had old Dean Brogan, which is basically Dean Broken at that point.
Yeah, it was.
And he had Renner.
Yeah.
Who just wasn't very good.
No.
Never.
Not much you can do with that, is there?
It's worrying. Look, 3-time premiership ruckman, very dominant. I think the best utility type ruckman on this list, Brad Holden's.
Yep. Spoke about him 3 times, actually, in the list we just talked about. Just, really, really good. Super important to that Geelong side. Hard very hard to stand out in that side because of how good the list was, which I think is just more credit to Ottens, that I do remember a fair few key moments from him and the way he could really change the tide of a game.
Yeah, absolutely. Not many ruckman take mark of the year, do they?
No.
That's very...
Yeah, they are generally mostly pretty uncoordinated. So for Ottens not to be, again, credit to him.
I also think that's one of the best marks I've ever seen.
It was a very, very good mark.
He just soared.
Yeah, huge.
Was it better than Nick Nat's one? Which is obviously so played and such a focal point for the game.
I just want to know how much of... Obviously, it's an incredible mark. Nick Nat is an incredible athlete. One of the most athletic people I've ever seen play the game of AFL. But is it just even credited even higher because it's Nick Nat? You know, he's kind of the face of...
Yeah.
He's the face of so much for that West Coast club who have built an amazing fan base purely because they have been so good for so long. They've recruited excellently. Credit to them for getting Nick Nat back fit as well, but I don't know how much of that was kind of milked just because it's Nick Nat.
Yeah, I can't see if it's... It's tough, because if it's Simon Taylor taking Nick Nat into his mark, then it probably goes to Oddens, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely does. There's no doubt in my mind, which is why, like I said, I'm trying not to take anything away from Nick Nat because, like, he's such an athletic powerhouse of a man, terrifying to look at.
Oh yeah,
and he's a phenom as well. He's just so fit, can jump so high. So it was obviously incredible what he did. But you're right. If a lesser known player or someone less glamorous takes that mark, it probably doesn't get anywhere near half the attention.
Yeah, for sure. We'll move on now to Jolly, another player that's come up in the previous... This is pretty much where the previous ruckman end, isn't it? This is our last recovery of all ground, but a very, very capable player. As I said before, I really do think he was better at Collingwood.
Yeah.
I actually think for a brief period of time, he might have even been the best ruckman in the competition, even against Sandlands and Cox, purely because of how well he was ticking with that Collingwood midfield. Maybe not skill-wise, but in terms of his output at the time, I don't think that was a better... Even just for a fleeting few-week period, I think he was the best ruckman in the competition.
Well, he was almost perfectly what that Collingwood team needed, and obviously they shelled out for him, but looking back, it probably was a steal for what they got him for, because he filled all the holes in that side and just, really made them a very, very good squad.
And I don't even think that Josh Fraser was a bad ruckman. I mean, he wasn't fantastic. Obviously, Jolly is significantly better. But that's not a knock on Fraser at all. I thought Fraser was okay. So for Malthouse to have gone, right, this is what I need, and to have gotten the absolute glove-fit player for that Collingwood team, and he was the glove-fit player.
Yeah, he was moulded for that squad.
And actually, it's something I want to cover in a later series as well, is Collingwood's team in that time, because they just had such a well-rounded squad, I thought.
Yep.
Because it was like when we've talked about it so much, more so off camera than on the podcast, but the difference between your first player and your 22nd best player needs to be pretty tight, and I thought Collingwood had that.
Yeah, I would agree. That was a very well-built squad by Malthouse. I just think he found what they needed. He found good tactics, and they were really, really good to watch.
Well, we can't talk about ruckman without one of the dominant cult heroes of the 2000s, that's Spider Everett.
Yeah.
Very, very much loved by both St Kilda and Hawthorn, I feel like. Just a very imposing, physical brute of a ruckman.
Oh yeah, he's another one. He's absolutely terrifying to look at. He's so broad and just so tall. And yeah, you're right. He just imposes his will onto the... It probably won a fair few taps out of fear alone, I would say.
The ruckman says, nope, no thank you.
Yeah, I would not be jumping against him, put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we'll cover the last of the 2001s with Luke Darcy. I really fought for him to be in this segment. I think he was a fantastic ruckman. I think he, like Cox, in many ways was a prototype for what was to come. Probably not as good as Cox, I think is fair. But he wasn't.
But who was?
No, and it's really hard to benchmark, players against Dean Cox and all this, because it's tough to grade a player against greatness, which is what Dean Cox has.
It was. He's Hall of Fame for sure.
Oh, no question. So, Darcy, for me, he's right up there in this list, I think.
Yeah, no, I would agree. That's probably unfortunate not to have had a little bit more success with that Bulldogs team. I think they were very, very good.
Yeah.
But he was important to that squad. He was important to a good team. And I think that's why these guys are here, right? They were all important to teams that were also good and had at least some form of success, even if, as is the case with Darcy, not as much as they would have liked.
Players I want to quickly mention as well before we kick it on to the 2010s. I want to talk about Adam Goodes very briefly, purely because he did play some time in the ruck. Almost, some people do consider him the last ruckman to win the Brownlow. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think Jason Ball did more of the ruck work.
Oh, no, he definitely did.
But he did do some taps, so you can't not mention him in this segment.
Yeah, I think what hurt Goodes was just how good he was at other roles.
Yeah.
Not that he couldn't have been an absolutely decimating ruckman. It's just when you watched him coming out of the middle, or when he transitioned into that centre-half back rebound defender role, he was just so good everywhere that it kind of felt like a waste to have him in the ruck, because you could have someone like Jason Ball who just kind of does his job and then get that huge impact from Goodes in other areas of the squad, which just helped them out more.
If Jeff White plays on a team that wasn't Melbourne, does he make the list?
Yeah, I think so. I think he was plagued by being on terrible teams.
And Fremantle, and in fairness, he did play on a horrific Fremantle team.
Yeah, well, I don't think he really he didn't play a single season of his career with a good list, just about. He was a good player, another one who could kick a goal, read the game very, very well, and just a really good tap ruckman for some. I don't know his exact height, but I think he was a few centimetres shorter than most of the other ruckmen at the time, and yeah, he just dominates.
Any more you want to mention before we move on?
No, I think that's all for me.
Yeah, I'm pretty. I think we covered off most of the players. I mean, there was a couple of serviceable ruckmen like your Troy Simmons types at Richmond, but again, we are talking about the creme de la creme.
Yeah.
And Troy Simmons is not that.
No, he's not.
And also, Clem Michael is not that either.
No, he's also not. You're correct.
Nor is Simon Eastaugh. Nor is Adrian
Alright, let's move on, Jesse.
Nor is Barnaby French.
What about Stanto Halpin, though?
I knew he'd make his way in here.
No. We should move on.
The only time he gets mentioned is in the UFC. That is the only environment he is comfortable in.
Yeah.
And somehow he start punching on with the trainer or the referee.
Yeah, no, he'd find a way, wouldn't he?
He would. Look, we'll move on to the 2010s. Now, we've written down 5 names here that deserve a mention. Max Gawn, we'll start with.
Yep.
You're a big Max Gawn fan.
Huge
I
Max
know you're a
Gawn
Max
fan.
Gawn fan. Tell us why.
I think Gawn has really just taken what Cox did. Like, I think he had obviously the advantage of Cox coming before him. He got to watch a lot of footage and see how the game really developed.
Yeah.
But I think he sort of does what Cox did in a more impressive way for me, because I think the game is a lot harder to read and sort of dominate like he does than it used to be. He's amazing in the contested mark, goes forward and kicks a goal, albeit his set shot leaves a lot to be desired. But he can go forward, kick a goal. He takes disgusting contested marks, and you just barely see him win a tap. That Melbourne year where they came so close yet so far, I attribute so much of that to Gawn. I also attribute so much of the way Clary Oliver has developed into such a hard nut contested player is because of just Gawn's beautiful tap work to him.
He does make a big difference for sure. Does he have the worst television commercial of the last 5 years though?
Yes.
I think it has to be there.
He has absolutely no camera presence. I think you can tell with a 2-second look at him that you would never want the man on camera.
But like Amazon as well, like they can afford better actors than Max Gawn.
Yeah, they can, and they. It's funny though. It's funny.
It is like, but surely they can't. Surely there can't be a worse one than that. Recently.
No, I don't think so. I think it is definitely the worst.
Yeah, it's a.
He's an awkward man.
He is an awkward man. I think that's fair. Look, can't not talk about Brodie Grundy here.
Yep.
Especially in the last few years, when I think with these two especially, when they're being seriously talked about for a Brownlow, despite the obvious heavy midfield bias towards that medal, they have to get mentioned. My only thing with Grundy is, can he go missing?
Yeah, and that's another thing I've probably noticed more. I think last year I would have said, I think Grundy is super underappreciated. I would have picked last year that he will 100% win a Brownlow in his career, just because he kind of, as much as the ruck is an underappreciated role, he's kind of just like a midfielder who takes taps, isn't he? He gets so much of the footy, has such a beautiful disposal. But you're right, he can get shut out. He's probably more of a confidence-based player than I expected. And I have seen him genuinely have a lot of not impressive games this year, which I don't think I saw from him last year. Like I said, I still think he's him and Gawn are the two obvious picks for AA. This year, I mean, a man will talk about Nick Nat is obviously in the conversation as well. But the last couple of years, they've both just been incredible, and also very different styles.
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
They've really showed how polarizing the ruck position can be, because you can do, you can be much more of a heavy ball winner and ball mover, run, and carry the ball as well. Or you can sort of do what Gawn does and just be a pillar of dominance.
How much has season 2020 hurt Grundy's value? Because there's obviously all the talk about that contract, all the hype about him being possibly the best since Jim Steins.
Yeah.
Even overtaking Cox in that reign. How much has this season impacted him going forward, do you think?
The season's not over, so it's hard to say, but I definitely have seen a lot more flaws pop up in Grundy's game this year than I would have liked. I probably would have to retract my statement of he'll definitely win a Brownlow. I think he's still, if he can find what he had last year, he's definitely every chance, but...
That's fair.
Yeah, it has hurt him. I think he nowhere near has a stranglehold on how important his role was and how he just kind of carved his own niche in the game. Because, like you said, he can just go missing, which is not what you want from a star player. You can't afford to have that from your star player.
Not when you're paying him, $1 million a season.
Yeah.
It's an obscene amount of money.
It is. And last year, I would have said 100% deserves it. This year, it's questionable.
Is it almost... Do you reckon the money's almost the problem?
I don't know if it's so much the money as much as it is the attention and maybe even a little bit his ego. Again, I don't really know much about Brady Grundy in his personal life or off camera, but I know the same things probably happen with Dusty a little bit, and also my favourite player, DeGoey, when they
He is your favourite player.
When they get so much media attention and they consistently get told how good they are, you can feel like you've made it and then sort of slip into a little bit of complacency and maybe not push yourself as hard as you maybe once would have, because you feel like you do have that cushioning behind you that's going to protect you from any sort of criticism. And yeah,
you got your legacy.
Yeah, exactly.
At that point, look, we'll move on from Grundy now. God, we just abuse Collingwood people on the show, don't we?
We do.
We really do.
We do. We don't like Collingwood.
I don't know. I mean,
no, actually, I don't mind Collingwood. I don't like Richmond.
I don't like Richmond.
Yeah.
Sorry, Richmond fans. Oh dear, that goes.
In fairness, we did. We were very, very heavy on the praise for Pendlebury. I do love my boy Pendles. We don't dislike all of Collingwood. And
I think we were pretty complimentary of Richmond in episode 2 as well.
Yeah, look,
they deserved it.
They do. I'm objective. I don't like Richmond, but I have nothing but respect for what they've been able to do with this dynasty that they've built. They're an amazing team, and I genuinely do enjoy watching them.
Absolutely. Look, Todd Goldstein, I think deserves a mention purely because he's always been in that top 5 ruckman for pretty much the decade.
Probably just a better version of, well, look, not, but kind of, yes, a better version of Jeff White, because he's never really been in a good team. Obviously, North haven't been as crap as the teams Jeff White.
He's made a couple of finals, and he got into a prelim one year.
Yeah.
Pretty much off his own back, though, in fairness.
Exactly, right. A lot of it is just Goldstein dragging that team. He's never really had a super dominant midfield to work with. He's just kind of had to do it on his own, which is what makes him so impressive. And done it for so long, so consistently.
He's arguably got the best midfield he's ever had now, while he's in the more twilight phase of his career.
And that's what I'd say, the twilight as well. It's a gradual decline for Goldstein. I think he has to take a little bit more of a step back. Secondary ruckman coming in, like I guess Marjack Dor and stuff like that, taking a little bit of the pressure off him.
But can you rely on Dor?
No, you definitely can't, which is why Goldstein's still the number 1 ruckman in that side. I think he could be a small burst, high-impact player and get more out of his career, but North can't afford to do that. They need Goldstein to play as much game time as he does.
You'd almost want to see him leave for his career. Because he's gonna do his knee, or something's gonna happen at North if he keeps having to shoulder the obscene amount of work he's doing at the moment.
Could be an absolutely insane number 2 ruckman to a good squad. I agree.
Can you imagine him on West Coast?
Yeah, that's probably his dream, isn't it? I mean, I think a lot of players' dreams to play for that West Coast squad. Really good club culture. Just a very, very good list. We talked about it. If Oscar Allen is your worst player and you're 22, you're doing quite well. Yeah. Because you could do a lot worse than Oscar Allen. Paddy Dow. No, but yeah, I would like to see him leave. I think he's kind of North, though, isn't he? It'd be very sad for North. I think they're they're struggling with memberships and fan bases at the moment. It'd be a big hit to them to lose him. But for him personally, I do think it would be the right call.
Even at Bulldogs.
Yeah, that would be nice, playing second fiddle to Timmy English.
To a developing ruckman that's getting there.
Yeah.
As opposed to unreliable backup options. English, Goldstein might have to shoulder more of the workload he would at West Coast, but he's also shown a lot less of the workload he's got now, which I think is really important.
It is. If he wants more longevity, definitely. And if he just wants to go down as a North Melbourne club legend,
which is fine,
it is completely fine, and that's exactly what he will go down as if he continues to just do what he's doing at North. But I think he could be very, very successful at another club.
I would like to think North Melbourne fans would have the decency not to begrudge him for leaving, though, because I think at the same time we need to understand that he is a club legend at North right now. But he's got every right to want to win a premiership.
Of course, he deserves it.
And given that North don't really have any serious rivals, because no one takes him seriously, it's a bit tough to say, oh, well, don't... It's like, he's not going from Collingwood to Carlton.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he might go to Western Bulldogs or whoever, but it's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's not. I just think it would be a huge hit for that North Melbourne squad.
Definitely.
Who are... and, I mean, it's probably just going to give them more money to buy okay players with for way too much money and really just hurt them in the long run.
I can see it already, can't you? They throw a $1.5 million contract to Isaac Rankin and does his knee.
Yeah.
And everyone's sad.
I could definitely see that happening.
Except for Stewie Doo, who's probably having a whale of a time with his $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll move on. I think almost missed the boat with his injuries recently. But my goodness, he's come back strong this year. That's Nick Naitanui.
Yeah.
For most athletic player I've ever seen, I think it's fair to say. For a long time, he wouldn't make the commitment around the ground. Then he started doing it. Then he broke down. Now he's come back and realised the perfect role for him, I feel like.
Yeah, he is an absolute machine to watch. He just pops up at the most opportunistic moments and really has such a big gameplay impact that it's hard not to just be in absolute awe when you watch him. He lost a lot of probably what could have been very, very pivotal years in his career to that injury, which was unfortunate. But credit where credit's due, he has come back probably stronger than ever and is definitely in the conversation for All-Australian this year. Has had a few games like Grundy where he just goes missing a little bit, but he can absolutely take over the entire game.
I think he's my All-Australian ruckman this year. I think.
Again, season's not over. Hard to say. Gawn has missed a little bit. Grundy's had his quiet games. Nick Nat's had his quiet games. But if you're going on peaks, I think Nick Nat has hit higher peaks than just about any ruckman I've ever seen.
When Naitanui is on, that's it.
It's poetry in motion.
We've seen him, win games off his own boot against North, against GWS. We've seen him win games off his own hands in ruck contests. There was a fantastic breakdown on Fox a few weeks ago where they really did show West Coast midfield setup and just Naitanui's ability as a tap ruckman, which I think is something he didn't have at the start. But he's really developed now, and that's his ability to actually get the ball to the right areas. Yes, West Coast have an insane midfield, as we've seen in episode 1, the tier list. Go and watch that one after this. But Naitanui just makes them that extra touch better.
Oh, yeah, and look at the impact he managed to have at the beginning of this year off, 60 to 70% game time. They were still resting him. They were making sure his body's right. And he was still just so good. Just still had the most hit-outs in the game and didn't, missed a quarter of footy. It's phenomenal to see.
Now, you're a big Supercoach man, Jaden.
Yeah.
I'm giving the choice of Grundy, Gawn, Naitanui. Who do you have?
Start of the year, I went Gawn and Grundy. Don't regret my decision. Didn't have a lot of faith in Nick Nat's body.
That's fair.
And I think now I still probably have Gawn as a lock coming into a fresh season, hoping that he stays fit because, like I said, he is just a pillar of dominance. I very rarely see him taken out of the game. And then my second spot will be between Grundy and Nick Nat. If Nick Nat managed to go the end of the season and picks up his game time a little and remains unscathed in the injury department, then I'll probably be starting Nick Nat next year, I think.
That's fair. Look, we'll finish off our 2010s ruckman with a personal favourite of mine. Very nice guy, very dominant ruckman. I always think of the 2013 qualifying final against Geelong. with the ridiculous helmet. That's my everlasting memory of Aaron Sandilands. He is a fantastic player. Bled for Fremantle. Not many ruckmen win club best and fairests, especially in the era where it was basically just the Matthew Pavlich coronation.
Oh yeah,
ceremony
to
every year.
even be in the same conversation as Pavlich just shows how absolutely phenomenal he was.
Obviously not the most athletically gifted ruckman I've ever seen, I think is fair to say. But pure dominance.
Oh yeah, no, he was incredible to watch. So tall. Looks like Lurch from the Addams family. But I always did really like watching Sandilands play. Living in WA actually, it's where most people I've at least grew up with and like watched footy with and stuff were Eagle supporters. He got a lot of undeserved flack. I think Cox was probably the better player for like the majority, but man, Sandilands was so dominant as well and played a very, very different role.
Cox was a better player, but if you take me back and offer me two cards, one's Cox, one's Sandilands, say pick a card, any card, and I grab Sandilands, I'm not complaining.
No,
because
you're not.
At the end of the day, like, yes, Cox is the better ruckman, and as a Fremantle supporter, yes, it obviously hurts to say that, but he's the better ruckman. But Sandilands' ability to just swing the game and just to make an impact, like, sometimes a player's impact isn't solely based on stats.
No, it's
which
not.
is what we see a lot with your Trelaws.
But isn't Sandilands still up there with the most hit-outs of all time anyway?
But it's purely because his around the groundwork wasn't there that he's not remembered. But I think, personally, outside of Cox, there's not a lot of better ruckmen in this list that we've talked about.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Gawn and Grundy definitely have the opportunity if they keep doing what they're doing.
They need probably two or three more seasons for me.
But how is Sandilands' longevity too, with a body that really gave up on him very early, and he just sort of refused to let it beat him?
And you've got to remember, he didn't play a lot at the start either. He was drafted in 03. He didn't play consistently until 06. Even then, he was dropped to the waffle. I remember him playing at Estremel in 06. Just this brute of a man.
He was, and he just didn't lose taps. Probably the 10 centimeters taller than everyone else helped, but he just didn't lose taps.
But you got to remember as well, like Peter Street, 200, same height, rubbish, terrible player.
Yeah, and Sandilands I think worked very, very hard on his disposal as well to really look way less uncoordinated in his later years, and you actually didn't. You didn't worry when he had the ball in his hand in his later years, which was credit to him because he wasn't always the best disposal.
Another defining moment for Sandilands, 2018, Free vs Richmond, MCG. Everyone remembers David Mundy's goal. No one remembers the work he did to get the ball out and then away.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect example of what I was saying about before. It's a completely underappreciated role. Without some of these ruck taps, you never get a lot of these great moments with, clearances down, kicking forward, and just all the quick goals and all the quick turnarounds where, teams kick 6 goals in 6 minutes to come back. It all starts at the ruckman, and I just don't think they get enough credit for it.
Absolutely. Look, we'll finish off with a few ruckmen that we think can be in our 2020s list when we revisit this in 10 years' time in about season 43. Hopefully a few of these guys will actually be on the show by then.
Oh yeah, that'd be nice.
Well, we'll say the 3 names, we'll go from there. So we've got O'Brien, Draper, English as our 3. O'Brien, I think, is probably the safest bet here.
Yeah.
Draper, I need to see more, but I can understand why you've nominated him. English, he's come a long way, but he's still got a long way to go.
Definitely, but can I just preface this with you wanted to put the Big O on here,
and I think he's a hero.
I think that English is so much further along than the Big O in development, and he's also 3 years younger, and he's also. I mean, it's hard for the Big O because obviously they have Big Stefan Martin there, who probably unlucky not to get a mention here. I just don't think has done really enough career-wise.
Mate, you could. Big O could punch you and you would say sorry to him. That is the influence of the Big O.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But he's not a good ruckman.
No, he's not.
For a 26-year-old, I'd want him to be further along. I'll start with Draper just because I think it's the quickest.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you. We definitely need to see more. I think his inclusion here is probably more a testament to how weak ruckmen are at the moment as opposed to how good Draper is. Obviously, I've really liked what I've seen. He's only played a couple of games, but there are just not that many good young ruckmen at the moment.
One caveat I will say to that point is that it's really hard to pick a ruckman until about 3 or 4 years in.
Yeah, I agree.
They don't come in and make that huge impact because they're not physically there.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think that's why English obviously has he probably has arguably has a bigger ceiling than O'Brien, but O'Brien is more AFL ready even now.
Yeah, he is. And, that's why I probably just refuse to put the Big O on here. Can you imagine him ever being able to stand up to someone like Nick Nat? It's just not going to happen, ever. If he's 26 now and looks like that, it's not going to happen for him.
Does Laddams get a mention here?
Maybe.
If he stops breaching protocols and all that.
Yeah, maybe he does. It's hard to say. I probably haven't watched Port enough this year to really confidently say yes or no.
He's your type of player though, Jaden. He's a very dual position player. He's more than capable going forward.
Yeah, like I said though, Westhoff, Dixon, it's...
Remember when Westhoff was peak ruckman for Port when they started randomly winning games?
He was a unit that one year. He was just randomly in the ruck, and then they decided to play him at back pocket, and now they suck. They're good this year, but Westhoff is no longer in the back pocket, which I think was a horrible mistake. But
he was never going to be a defender, Westhoff.
No, he spent his entire career forward. He came in as a key full forward, scrungy little skinny kid, and just grew a beard, and now he's a beast.
He is very, very good player. I think Westhoff, and one that I think doesn't get enough appreciation for his career.
Yeah,
he's played 200 games.
I'd agree. Yeah,
he's been around for a pretty long time now.
All at Port too.
Yeah, exactly. Good one club player. He's a player I'd like to see stay at Port for the duration.
Yeah,
I don't want to see him do a Dean Brogan and go to GWS.
Nah, I wouldn't like to see that either. I also don't think there's probably not a huge market for a player like Westhoff at the moment for him to take one of those ludicrous contracts.
He's probably, in fairness, was there a market for Dean Brogan in 2012?
Well, with two teams very, very young who need players, I guess there's a market for anyone, right?
I mean, Brent Thornton got a contract.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was never good.
No, he wasn't ever good.
You should know.
I do know.
I mean, I dealt with Shane Parker, but Thornton, far out. That's a disaster class.
Yeah, that's a couple of wooden spoons in an era I'd rather forget.
Well, look, on that Brent Thornton note, we're going to finish up our Ruckman podcast show today. Jane, thanks for joining us. Any kind of last wrap-ups here you want to talk about with the Rucks?
Nah, all good. Like I said, very underappreciated. They do not get enough Brownlow votes that I think they should, and a lot of key AFL moments from the past definitely started with a ruck tap.
Absolutely. Next episode, we're going to look at some of the forwards and how the evolution has changed from the G train on.
The G train.
So it's pretty much a G train special.
Yeah, very excited for that one. Can't wait. Love talking about key forwards.
So make sure you purchase your tickets. The inspectors are coming around. We'll see you in a few moments for episode 5 of the Darting Around podcast.